Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to the show, everybody. I got to tell you, I listen to that opening all the time, and I still get excited about it because I get to interview and talk to people who are working to live their best life. And in some cases, they're working to help you live your best life so that you can get past all of the stuff that we all go through in life and then come out the other side and recognize that this is and can be the adventure of a lifetime. And the gentleman that we have with us today, he's in Southern California currently, and his name is Seph Dietlin. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I'm a little self-conscious about last names because I screw them up so regularly, but I'm glad I was able to get it right.
Usually the only people who get my name correct is the police office, the California Highway Patrol. when they pull me over, they look at my driver's license and they say, "Mr. Dietlin, do you know how fast you were driving?" It's like, oh my gosh, you got my last name right.
and then of course the conversation degenerates from there.
But sometimes not, flash them
exactly.
a smile, little legs, sometimes,
Well, and I don't know if you have never been to Southern California, I will tell you that people tend to drive pretty fast because they need to get to where they're going, and traffic is so congested most of the time. When they get an opening, they really go for it.
Make it count. Yes.
Exactly. And first of all, I want to highlight your website, which is talktomyangels.com. And you can go there and find out all the work that he does. And he's a hypnotherapist. He's in a angel channel. He's an energy healer. But as he said right before we got started, those are just simply tools. And they're tools to help him help you get to where you need to go. And I wanted to explore that because you came up with a term that I had not heard before, but I love the term, and it's human potential activator. How did you come up with that term?
I got it from the angels, actually. I know that sounds very funny and frisky, but I got it from the angels. And it was when I realized that there's a connection between when they asked me to learn hypnotherapy. And of course, I use my whole brain state to access them. And to give a little backstory on that, we have two hemispheres of our brain, and hypnotherapy acts to unite those hemispheres, and much the way creativity does, meditation does, and all those other things. And when our brain is in unity with both the right and left hemispheres, that's where we live our best life, period. Everything that we do is all about uniting those hemispheres and accessing our full brain power as the two work together. Well, that's what gives us access to the channeling. That's what gives us access to any of the other spiritual gifts, is when those two brains are put together. And I was looking for something that united being able to bring other people into higher conscious states and actually going into a higher conscious state to serve them. And I realized that ultimately it was about what happens to the person who comes to be served, which is it activates the part in them that moves them into a fuller experience of their potential. And that's how it came in. It just sort of flew in awareness one day.
I love it. I think it's great. Let's talk about the left and the right brain a little bit, because that is I've heard that many times before. It's based in science, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it our left side or is it our right side that handles all of our motor functions and breathing and the stuff that we don't necessarily have to worry about and control.
Right. It is the left brain that handles everything that deals with being a human. And that means also linearity. It means things like adding up math. If you want to start your car, or if you want to fix your carburetor, or whatever you want to do, that's all going to come from a part of us that knows linearity. If I want to design a skyscraper, I'm going to use mostly my left brain for the engineering involved. That's why engineers per se are very dominantly left brained, and they think a lot. And the way that they speak, you can tell that they're always in their left brain. People who are accountants, money, numbers, all of that is left brain functioning. And then right brain is the creative side. And of course, in the world that we live in, which is left brain dominated, it wants to diminish the value of the access that we're given to our right brain. Oh, well, that's creative. Oh, well, we can just throw out the arts. We don't need the arts. Why do you need that? Teach kids arithmetic or whatever, right? But ultimately, that's actually the part of us that's nonlinear. That's where our good ideas come from. And the good news is that when we're working with both, we're working with both. So we're not cutting off the left brain. We're actually asking it to work in unity with a more powerful part of us that has creative ideas that are nonlinear. That's where we can invent things because we have a visionary aspect in our right brain.
And so that's what makes an engineer who can design creative things. They're in touch with both sides, whereas a lot of engineers that at least that I know, and accountants and those folks are very linear. They're very left brain, and it's very in their mind it's complete, and it doesn't have, that's all they got is their left brain, and that's how they think, that's how they operate their lives, in a lot of cases. But
Yes.
when you are a creative who is also an engineer, that's where the brand new types of buildings come from, and the new ways of doing things. And is that kind of the way that works?
Yes, it's that and more. Because when we're left brain, the odd trick about the left brain is it's very deceptive in seeing everything as an absolute. That's a key word here, because the absolute that it accepts is all based in limitations. Linearity is purely a limitation. So everything is like a container. This is the end of it, this is the beginning of it. And the left brain only computes with limitations. Everything is something until it's not. So everything lays out that way. And that is the way that it lays out in the reality that we live in. But there's another component to what we live in as well. And the left brain doesn't incorporate that aspect because by design it can't. So if for whatever reason during our lives we get locked down in left brain, well, I guess that's a loaded word, but if we get locked down in left brain, either from trauma, that will do it, because the left brain is also designed to protect us. It's designed to see incoming danger, and it is designed for our survival. And the left brain is the one that is responsible for that. So, for example, if someone has a very traumatic experience at a young age, then that part for protection and survival becomes much stronger and keeps them from incorporating right brain, because that uses aspects of us that aren't factored in what we can already see in the landscape of what we have around us. So that's why we have anxiety. The anxiety is the left brain at work, and fear is only in the left brain. So the right brain knows that there's a universal flow to something. And a good practical example of that is, let's say I'm an entrepreneur and I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent at the end of the month because things got a little slow or I had a little more output that I had expected. And here I am, it's maybe the 15th of the month, and my left brain is computing the way things are and the way things have gone, and has already painted a scenario at the end of the month where my resources are exhausted. Yet the right brain has a peace of mind. Why does it have a peace of mind? Well, it already knows that there's a new customer coming in, or there's a new opportunity that the left brain doesn't know. So the left brain is always computing things with what is seen in the visible world, whereas the right brain is able to factor in what it knows through intuition.
So that works with the scientific community as well, I would think, because they're very evidence based, very what they can see in front of them based, rather than looking at a bigger picture
Mhm.
of incorporating the right brain as well as the left brain. Is that right?
Well, certainly the visionary aspect is a right brain trait, and it is strictly a right brain trait. And one of the first steps forward for gaining access to our whole brain functioning, or the synchronization of both hemispheres, is the understanding that these two hemispheres are completely different in their orientation. And no person's right or left brain is oriented differently. What happens is that we're oriented differently or wired differently, whether we're mostly tapped into left, mostly tapped into right, or completely in synchronization with both. So the left brain has specific characteristics, which is methodical, logical, linear, and it's the place where fear and the illusion of separation from creator is. And right brain is what's connected to our higher self and creator, and the creativity and knowing that comes from it. And they operate with two different ways that they function. So once we learn to allocate the hemisphere of our mind with what it's capable of doing, then we start to live a powerful life, whether we're a scientist, an entrepreneur, a doctor, a engineer, or whoever we are. Now, typically what happens is a couple things. Maybe we have a job that is left brain focused or left brain dominated. Well, because we utilize it so much, we may not even allow ourselves that much access to the right brain because that bridge has to be fortified. But what happens, for example, with entrepreneurs, the reason that they're able to create so much success is because they're using both of them. So anyone who is creating much success in one way or another is uniting both. A lot of people come to me for hypnosis strictly for the aspect of getting into, like, let's say, going to the gym and building the muscle, but building the bridge that links those two hemispheres. Because when we have access to the whole brain at once, that's where we start accessing both levels of power that we have.
In your work, in your experience, because there's some people that, well, it appears that they're born left brain focused, or if you're creative and you're a songwriter or an author or a poet or an artist, you're more right brain creative and more right brain focused. Is that part of our upbringing? Is that just our DNA, how we are built? What what makes us different that way?
That's a good question. And one of the things that I factor in when I do my work, because I also channel angels who have given me a completely different perspective of the reality that we live in, why we're here, and what it is that characterizes each of these different aspects of it. And ultimately, before we came into the body, by being born and living out this experience, our multidimensional being, or our soul, our true higher self, made agreements about what it wanted to experience. And to a certain degree, it gave our physical being, or the agreements with our physical body, in such a way that would orient us in a way that would serve that path. So if my path was to become an engineer or an accountant, something that required a really well-developed left brain, then what I would do is be born in a body that had the presupposition to being that way. Our bodies are like seeds. And in much the same way you plant a radish seed, you're not going to get a carrot, because inside that radish seed is everything that it needs to be a radish. Then when we're born, we're also born with very unique codes inside of us, which we agreed to as a multidimensional being before we took the body. And one is not either right or wrong, no pun intended, but there's no correct or incorrect. It just has everything to do with what we do. And what you'll notice, though, too, is that people who are more left-brained, they like to get into debates because everything has to be absolute. Otherwise, they have to deconstruct their world. They're not factoring in another piece. I get a lot of people who say, when it comes to like the angel channeling and the usefulness of the right brain, they say, oh, that doesn't mean anything. And it's because their reality is constructed in an absolute fashion linearly, that they would have to deconstruct their reality to incorporate that. And because they don't want to do that, they just assume that the reality that they've constructed is an absolute, and it's not. But they can't see it because of perception, and left brain perception is always something really weird. And if you want to have a good way of really seeing how that works as a scientific experiment, have fun diving into social media comments. Talk about making assumptions about other people, right? And I've had people make comments toward me where they were absolutely certain about who I was and what I said. And when they communicated it back, I just realized this is all a misperception, but I'm not going to clear it up because I already know that you live in a world where what you see and what you perceive is an absolute. And in no way, in shape, or form can you encompass perception in that and understand that it's a variable, right? And so that's where we get the idea to know that we have a sort of a seed, which gives us the skills already. One of the things people say to me all the time, you have an amazing voice for hypnosis. You have an amazing voice for soothing people. And I just know that in my little seed, in my little radish seed that I am, that I chose this voice so that I could do the work that I do, because on some level, my soul knew it was coming.
I have the same experience when I do the radio shows. I've
Mhm.
had people say, I'd sit there and listen to him read the phone book because for whatever reason, they like they like they like my voice. I didn't make it. It's just me. But that's interesting. I had a unique conversation one time with a I think she was an astrophysicist, or she was a
Mhm.
scientist in some manner or form. And we were talking about psychic mediums. And I've been doing this work since 2003. I've interviewed many, many, many very talented psychic mediums, including John Edward, John Holland, and many others. And she could not get her head around the fact that it's possible. She wouldn't even give room for the possibility that we are able to communicate with other sources through energy from other places, because in her mind it was all linear, and this is just not so. In her mind, every psychic is a cold reader and somebody that doesn't have any gifts to be able to do that. And there was absolutely no way. I tried. I really did. I tried, but there was no way that I could ever convince her of anything other than what she could physically see in front of her.
And that's true in many cases. And yet, at the same time, there's so many things in our reality that were never created from the left brain, which is why we now tap into the knowing that both are helpful. And the reason that both are helpful is because anything that is different than what it already is has to come from the area of possibility. So if only what's possible is what we see around us now, if we were to go back to the 1700s, that means that there could never be such a thing as a car or a telephone or an airplane. It couldn't exist. And so even if you remove the spiritual or conscious aspect of it, that also incorporates everything. And the mind or left brain works that way. I sold real estate in Southern California, and I remember showing people houses in 1998, and they said, "Do you think this house will ever be worth more than $400,000?" Right? And because that's how the left brain works. And if you said, yes, it will, they would tell you, no way, it can't, because they're going to use their current construct around value and project the future on it.
By the way, we are talking with Seph Dietlin, and if you go to his website, I said that right, Dietlin? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to his website, talktomyangels.com, and you can talk to him directly. You can give him a call. He's got a form that you can fill out so that you and he can get together, because there is so much. There's just so much that we don't know that will be something that is you can explore, but you have to be in a certain mindset to be able to do that. We need to take a break, but when we come back, I'm going to ask him what kind of mindset opens the doors to your right brain, the other side, to people that and entities that can be truly of help to you as you journey through life. You're listening to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. We'll be right back. It's just 30 seconds, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
They have your eyes. They have your ears. They have your smile. Now all they need is a little more of your time. Make a difference in your child's life, because anyone can be a father. It takes time to be a dad.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. We've got a great guest here today, and not only is he very articulate about what he does and what he knows, but he also makes it easy to understand. And there's ways that you can use that for your own purposes to become the person that you want to be. And so, Seph, it's great to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you, because one of the things that we talk about here is that at some point in your life, you go, why am I really here? Okay, I'm this engineer and I do this thing and I do then, but it doesn't make me happy. Why am I really here? What is my real purpose in life? How do you get somebody to open up who is a left brain person to now access a bit of the right brain?
Well, it depends on if they're coming to me to ask for access to something greater, because until someone is ready internally, there's got to be a willingness to do it first, or an openness. And most people get cracked open, I guess you could say, from some experience that would be, let's say, the form of a setback. And if that's someone like you in the audience, one of the things I can tell you is that's how I discovered the angels, because before I did this, I was a real estate agent. I was success driven. I was all of that, and would have easily diminished the ability that we have to do this. But what happens is that something traumatic usually happens. And afterward, we discover that our soul, or our eternal essence, sort of scheduled that setback to make sure that we didn't spend the whole entire time in our life being lost in the world of illusion or the world that is temporary and not really get the maximum experience out of this. And so we schedule this massive setback. And once we have a setback, then we start asking these questions, but we don't ask them from our mind, we ask them from consciousness. Now, technically, we access it all the time, whether we're left brain or right brain. And perfect examples of this could be you're in the shower and water or moving water and the relaxing state of being in the shower automatically puts us into hemispheric synchronization. And that's why we'll get into the shower and all of a sudden an idea that wasn't available to us before becomes available. The same thing will happen if we go to a gathering and they've got a fire pit, a fireplace, or if we go to a spa where they've got candles burning flame or fire, as long as it's not destroying anything, puts us into, and I'm going to say the word, hypnosis as well. And hypnosis is a state that we naturally go in and out of. People will ask me constantly, well, I don't think I can be hypnotized. I don't think I can go into hypnosis. And I ask them, do you fall asleep? And they say yes. And I say, well, on your way to sleep and on your way out of it, you reach a brainwave state that is hypnosis. Because if you are literally not sleeping all the time, then you can tell me you've never been hypnotized. But the brainwave state, that is the theta brainwave state, and parts of the alpha brainwave state, is parts where we start to access our right brain and our awareness. And so whether we realize it or not, or how often we do it or not, that gives us an entree point. And the other thing I would say to giving us access to that, because we want to start harnessing the power that's available to us, often we might start something like meditating. And then we go, well, I don't get it. I don't understand why people like to do this. And I was that person way before I started talking to the angels. And then one day I was in the shower and I got into that nice relaxed state and I went, wait a minute, this is that state. So the next time I went to the meditation, I just remembered being in the shower, and then it feels so good to be in that state. There you go. So there's many ways that we already access it. And so if it's difficult, we can access it that way. By the way, I just had a client a little while ago who is dealing with some trauma that keeps them in a state of mind where their mind is overly activated. So meditation isn't necessarily the best way for this person. And what I got for them is creativity, which is also something that puts us into the zone. So whether we go out and garden, I know lots of people who are left brain people who love to garden, and then they're happy afterwards, and they're happy because they got into hemispheric synchronization without knowing they got themselves into hypnosis, right? And so when we garden, when we paint, even if we're painting a bedroom, we get into the zone, what we call the zone. We get into a place. When we're driving, we get into that place. And what happens when people come to me for the work that I do is that we put intention around getting into that state and then leaning into that state or leveraging that state for something that is giving us some new information. And here's another thing that I was just reminded of, because I just heard that it started to rain really hard on the roof. Now, as they say, it doesn't rain in Southern California. I'm here to tell you that it does and is at this particular moment. But it's another way, thank you, universe. It's another thing. Weather like that puts us into a lethargic state. So rain has this ability to put us into that state as well. If it's a nice, relaxing rain, the ocean does it, nature does it. There's all kinds of portals in which we can open it up, or we already are.
Now, I'm going to ask you something that, and you can tell me whether I really should be on medication or not.
Ooh.
But with I feel like when I'm in the shower and water conducts electricity very well, and I feel like I'm it's easier for other beings to contact me, to make that connection, to make that energetic connection while I'm in the shower, because number one, I'm relaxed. Number two, it is conducting the electricity from my aura and my body and through them, and we can make that connection easier. Am I high, or is that kind of can be true?
We are learning more and more about the conductive ability or capacity that water has. And we know that there's experimentation where the water is put underneath a microscope, and we get to see the shifting changes of a sort of a crystalline structure based on the water. So yes, there is a conductive ability to water. Interestingly enough, people will take water and they will put it in a jar, and they will say nice things to this jar and unkind things to another jar, and then they'll put the water under a microscope. And the water that was spoken through intention with unkind words has a molecular structure that indicates that it is not fully structured. And there's research on this from a doctor in Japan, and I don't want to butcher up his name, but there's photos shown of the different water samples in this case. And interesting enough, as we already know, our bodies are made up of a certain percentage of water. And so absolutely, the crystalline structure of the water does actually work, not only with the synchronization, but it also works with our body as well, which brings us into knowing as well that the more we're in hemispheric synchronization, the healthier our bodies are, because our cells are part of this water, this field of water. And in that way, there is an effect. And so, not to overgeneralize this, but for the most part, most of the people that we know who are very happy or have easy access to that joy are also very healthy. They're in the hospital less, they have less chronic disease and that sort of thing. And also those that stay in the left brain, let's say, and in the fear and limitation that's associated with it, anxiety being one of the chronic aspects of that, then physical health is also symptoms. There's a lot of physical disease that's caused by depression, that's caused by anxiety. And it does actually have a connected effect. And eventually, everything is connected and everyone is connected, including our hemispheres. And then when you get that, things start to actually add up, and then things start to move more powerfully when you see the connection and everything like that.
And I just want to point out to everybody that they are finding out now, and it's actually been around for a little while, that stress is a major indicator and can cause physical pain, physical damage to the body if the stress becomes overwhelming. And so that's why meditation is helpful. That's why relaxing the brain and doing those things is really helpful to you from a physical sense. Mm-hmm. And now we need to take a break again for our halftime show, as it were. Oh, and it's just a minute, I promise. And it's Seph Dietlin, and go to his website again, talktomyangels.com. He is I got to tell you, he is a delightful guy, and I really enjoy the conversations that we have, because it really makes me think about what I'm capable of and what I'm not accessing that I would really like to moving forward. So we're going to take this break, and we'll be right back with Seph. Don't go away, please.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
A lifetime of savings can disappear overnight. Millions of dollars are stolen every day from unsuspecting older adults by family members, caregivers, and trusted professionals. If you suspect financial exploitation, Call the Elder Care Locator at 1-800-677-1116 or go online to the National Adult Protective Services Association to be connected with help in your area.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Yes, you're listening to the Brushwood Media Network. I highly suggest that you listen more to the Brushwood Media Network. Our show airs Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock Eastern, and then again at midnight Eastern, Monday through Friday. And we get to have some of the coolest people on the planet be here, and one of them are with us now. It's Seph.
Yeah.
Seph Dietlin is with us. And again, go to his website, talktomyangels.com. I gotta ask you, when you discovered that you could talk to the angels, did that kind of freak you out the first time that happened?
Honestly, yes and no. That's funny that you ask. So, for those who wanted me to say no, I actually asked for that and I was expecting it. And on some level, I knew that it had to be possible. And when I say yes, it came in a different form than I expected. And I expected it just to be a one off experience when I was having a bit of a breakdown. And I asked them to make themselves known to me so that I knew that everything was going to be okay. But then when they started talking the next day, and I realized I had sort of hit on a channel, I had the knowing that that was the case. And my background is such that I wouldn't really have been your prime suspect for this kind of thing. I don't have dream catchers in my house and things like that. And not that I'm diminishing that, but I wasn't already, let's say, on that journey or fully on that journey. And when I look back, I realize I was, but without knowing it. And so, yes, it was a little funky and a little not. But I will tell you that I made a promise to myself that I would never tell a soul that happened, which of course I'm doing right now. So I kind of broke that promise a few times. I just thought, wow, this is a really weird thing. And of course, this was in, I want to say 2001 or two. I don't remember the date per se. I just remember that it was right around that time. And I remember that because of the event that occurred that made it happen. And I know that it's been well over 20 years, but I didn't think it was going to be a significant event to keep track of later, but it's somewhere around that time. And at that time, we didn't have yoga studios on every corner. We didn't have meditation studios on every corner. We didn't have breath work and all of that stuff that's come into our mainstream conversation. Thankfully, it did. And interestingly enough, the first thing that the angels started going on about was that the world is evolving consciously. And that was the reason that they had come to me, was to calibrate in a way with them to be of service while this shift of consciousness is occurring, which we talk about now. We refer to it as the coming of the new earth. And those of us who understand that from a conscious perspective understand that the bad things that we see in the world are actually catalytic events that are shifting consciousness. So the new earth will be constructed in a completely different way. So it's sort of being deconstructed to be reconstructed, but from the level of consciousness, which again is then connected to the creator. So we're deconstructing the linear constructs, things like the money system and things like that. And they are dissolving in a way where, as we become more and more aware, more and more in tune with our inner divine, and then with each other, because there's kind of a hive effect there, that we get to the opportunity to reconstruct the world in a way that works for all. Yes, that means no more wars, no more poverty, and all of that is a symptom of the old linear structures.
You know, it's interesting because I started the show in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
I'd been studying pretty intently since 2001, learning about meditation and all of the right brain sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
And started the show, and that was the beginning of the Iraq War in 2003. And so there was a lot of a lot of hate, and there was a lot of upheaval, and there's a lot of division, and there were no shows out there like Positive Talk Radio. It was an outlier. There just weren't, nothing was like that. And so I was able to interview people like Neil Donald Walsh and Gary Zukav, who, by the way, are coming back on the show this month. So I get to interview them again. They're now about 80. And so, but it's important for me to continue on in my roots and to continue doing this, because I believe exactly like you do. It's kind of like a pendulum. The pendulum has to swing in a way that we decide we don't want it to swing that way anymore. And so it's going to come back, and then it's going to provide us with a whole different outlook. And one of the key proponents in my mind is that if we could all recognize that we're all one, that we all come from the same place, and we're all going back to the same place, then we would change. That would be enough to change everything, I would think. What do you think?
Absolutely. And first of all, it's funny that you mentioned Neil Donald Walsh, because his Conversations with God series is one of the things that the angels first introduced me to by synchronicity when I first became aware and communicating with them. And they used to guide me all kinds of places. Hey, go to a bookstore. One time they had me traipse all the way across town for an hour to find something that I was supposed to find that was quite pivotal, but they're really good at guiding like that. And when they first began their conversations with me about what they called heaven on earth, or what we now call the new earth, they mentioned this aspect that you're referring to, which is that ultimately this is an acceleration of unity consciousness. And not just unity like, hey, we're all inclusive, which has an element of non-authenticity to it. Meaning that the real inclusiveness is a unity consciousness that happens at a spiritual level, where we understand that our soul is not separate souls in the way that we think it is, but that it's sort of like the ocean, where it's sort of a cup of the water is you, a cup of the water is Neil Donald Walsh, a cup of the water is me, and a big cup of water, actually, in this case. But so
likewise, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, thanks to those times that the personal trainer that's like made it even bigger. So there is this aspect of us that is in unity. And what the angels had mentioned as far as this acceleration of this new earth is, and you mentioned it like seeing it like a pendulum, each of these contraction, which lead to an expansion, contraction, and expansion. Of course, the Big Bang is an expansion. Then we have this massive expansion that's meant to happen. And yet one day, soon, very soon, each person who acts in a way that doesn't realize that we are all the same being, and that if you send a war machine to another country, that's not another person, but you in a different body, that will become activated. And when that happens, all of the systems that are selfish by nature and separated by nature will completely cease to exist.
And have they given you any kind of a timeline?
I knew that question was coming. Yes. It's actually in an accelerated value. And even though those of us who are aware would love to accelerate that even more, there is something about the reason that we're here in the illusion of separation that we are served by. So in much the same way, and believe it or not, this period is like dessert. There's so much, as painful as it is to especially have to deconstruct and reconstruct our reality as we're guided consciously. And sometimes we look around and go, wow, this is more thorny than I thought it was. This is more dicey than I thought it was. And it was like, we get to this point where right now, where we look at is almost so immense as far as being fear-based, that it's actually dessert for our consciousness, because we came here to experience such a severe contrast to the light that we are from the dimension from where we came. And your question is about time, and there's not that many years left of this old earth and its old ways and its old constructs. There's not that many years, and there are many timelines. So there's no absolute, like it's going to happen at the end of the year or the end of 2 years, but there are many timelines. All of them will lead to that space. And a lot of the timelines that have the opposite of the light working, empowered by the greed or whatever, all of those timelines are just collapsing underneath the weight. According to the angels, we're actually ahead of schedule. And I know it looks like we've got a long way to go, but we're ahead of schedule. And they talk to me about things that I wouldn't talk to normal people around, because based on their interpretation, some people could see it as some contradiction of their absolute. But I will tell you one of the things they said to me recently. I know we're recording this in the beginning of March, and this was at the end of January. And if you remember, at the end of January, beginning of February, there was this sort of spaciousness where not a lot was happening, or not a lot looked like it was happening. And there was room for, in our collective soul agreements, something big that would have been catastrophic, because every catastrophe wakes up humanity, right? Like you mentioned, the Iraq War. We could mention 9/11, or the stay-at-home orders, or all of these different things that have happened. They have an effect of expanding us. Now, I remember when the stay-at-home orders were initially implemented in March of 2020, I went home, and the first thing the angels said is that this is one thing. There's only one reason why the Creator allowed this into our reality. It's a massive ascension portal. People who are not awake will wake up. People who are slightly awake will wake up more. And it's like basically moving everybody up the ladder.
And that's proven, I think, to be true,
It
because
is proven to be true. Yeah.
a lot of things have changed. People's ideas, their thoughts, what they're willing to work for, what they're willing to not work for. More importantly, there's a lot of different changes that are taking place, and I think it's an awesome. I personally believe that I came here to do what I'm doing, but also I wanted to be here during this time.
Absolutely.
To watch everything that was going on.
To be part of it, to be cast in this great melodrama, which is happening before us. And interesting enough, I was an actor, and I went to film school and studied writing. And there was a very interesting discovery I made when I learned how to write a screenplay, because there's 3 acts to a screenplay. There's the setup, there's the conflict, which is the largest part of any story, and then there is the conclusion, which is the resolve in the end. And there's a reason why stories are structured that way, is because we're living in that same story. And we're actually headed towards, and this is on a massive scale, like thousands of years kind of scale, we're headed towards the end of Act 2 and the beginning of Act 3, where the resolve happens and the unity comes in. And we get to be here in a state that is completely different than anything we can imagine. Anti-aging is one of the things that the angels told me about. We return to another form. In our form, our bodies have different forms. There's all kinds of amazing things that are available to us on a creative scale that we can't even think about. But back to this time in January, February, right? So remembering that these catastrophic things that could occur in the world can occur, and they're only allowed in by the Creator on different timelines if they have an effect of expansion connected to them. But if you remember that end of January, beginning of February, when things just seemed to be kind of standing still, where they just sort of appeared with a lot more spaciousness, it was because there was an event that could have occurred for the sake of expansion, But because we're kind of, I guess you could say, ahead of schedule, we didn't need it. So we just sort of cruised through it. And we just sort of had, even though the rest of the stuff that's going on is crazy enough, there was another thing that would have been occurring that would be like the equivalent of the stay-at-home orders that would have affected us personally in our personal lives, that would have disrupted our personal lives. But because our soul agreements had already accounted for the disruption, we didn't slate lots of events or lots of momentum in our soul agreements during that time. But since we didn't have to have that experience, then we just got to lay back and chill.
Thank goodness for that. I've had
Yeah.
enough of those other kind of experiences.
Right? Exactly.
So, by the way, we're talking with Seph Dietlin, and we need to take another quick break, and it's our last one, I promise. And then we're going to wrap it up with him and get all his information out so that you can go visit him, because he is well worth the price of admission. So we will return in just a second.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk, everybody. My name is Kevin McDonald, and we're talking to Seph Dietlin. And I got to tell you, I love some of these commercials because they do highlight some of the issues that we have in our world. Then there are people and organizations that are really trying to help. And if we could all just get into the boat and start paddling like hell in the same direction, I think that there's a ton that we could accomplish.
Yes. The last one, which was for the homeless youth and those that are trafficked, that is something that is epidemic, but it's also a symptom of the shift or the end of the life cycle of the old linear structures. And I can only say that soon we're going to see a totally different reality that we get to live in. And we're creating that as we speak, even just through these conversations.
I wanted to touch bases with you on that because I believe these conversations have resonance. They have energy to them, and they can provide other people. It's like when a rock goes into a lake, and the ripple effect of the rock going in there can be far, and it can be wide, and can be reaching a ton of people. And that's what I'm hoping to accomplish with this show.
Absolutely. And a lot of people that you talk to, and a lot of people that I talk to, who have diverted their lives from being in pursuit of amassing fortune and realizing that they had a much bigger calling in here to be a change maker in this world. It's interesting because in a certain way, you have to still participate in the old systems and, create resources for yourself. But you can tell when people really do have that goal in mind of the betterment of humanity and the acceleration of this conscious event that we're in the middle of. And as you mentioned, this show, and I'm sure that you can relate to this, there's certain times where you're going, how am I going to support myself? Because all I really want to do is give this, and not with the attitude of how do I monetize this or how do I make money from it, but how do I give this? And there is a resonance from these shows. And anything that we bring into this conversation, I know that when I show up on these shows, the first thing that I know is that I'm broadcasting a frequency, and anyone who's listening to it or who's supposed to listen to it gets to be changed just by listening to the show and bathing in that frequency.
Do you notice that a lot of times with the people that you work with and yourself, and I know it's happened in my life, that when you go down this particular road of trying to help humanity heal and to be better for everyone, and your motives are not financial based, they're not famous based. I don't want to be Taylor Swift or Kelsey or any of those.
I don't even know who those people are. So
well,
I've heard those names, but I have no idea who those people are.
you need to get out more. No, Taylor Swift is a singer of note and stuff, but that's not what I'm interested in. But what I'm here to tell people is that the universe will step up and it will take care of you.
Yes, that absolutely is the case, because even when we go to that whole brain synchronization, this is a wonderful way of putting a ribbon or bow on what we've done here today, is because ultimately the whole brain synchronization, or the hemispheric synchronization, actually opens us up to miracles. And miracles happen all the time. And when you're serving to this capacity and serving from a space of authentic alignment, they show up in a myriad of ways. Yes, I do monetize the services that I offer. That's not the motive, but what's interesting is that a lot of people start to show up and be served by them, and they invest in them as well and invest in themselves. Ultimately, though, and interestingly enough, when you do step up and serve without the concern about how your needs will be met, they're usually met by miraculous means. And that faith just only gets stronger and stronger, while the link between left and right brain gets stronger and stronger, and the fear becomes less and less. The faith becomes bigger and bigger.
I have story after story after story that I could tell you about how the universe has conspired over the last 20 years to put me into the position of where I can do what I'm doing now, even though there were long periods of time when I could not, when I was driving a bus for 12 years and doing things like that. But they conspire. They take the long view, I think. That's
well, I'm going to be in Seattle sometime. We are going to sit down and have a coffee. You're going to tell me those stories. I'm going to tell you some too.
I'm really looking forward to that. Seph Dietlin has been our guest. Go to talktoyourangels.com. We've got about a minute. Anything that you would like to tell our audience? I'm going to shut up now.
Talktomyangels.com. Yes.
Oops.
And yeah, no, that's okay. And one of the things that I've done is created a community online. And at my website, you can go do that. I'm going to be launching a podcast myself, and the conversation and the community and the podcast is going to be called Talk to My Angels. So it's a wonderful way to become part of an amazing, expansive conversation. And I also want to share that if you've listened to this at this point, just pay attention to how you're feeling. If you're feeling more expanded, if you're feeling more well, then know that it isn't just a feeling. You've accessed a part of yourself that has helped shift a part of yourself, and that will make a change in your external reality, remembering that our external reality is responsive and it will always respond to us. So continue to make those shifts on the inside. They're subtle. They are what makes the difference.
And I want to be on your show when it gets up and running.
Okay.
So, Seph Dietlin, go to talktomyangels.com. And I want to thank you for being here, young man. You're going to have to come back. We got more to the group that you have put together, which is a social group. We got to talk about that, because there are lots of lonely people who need to have like-minded people around them. I want to thank everybody for being here. And hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. We are a production of kmmedia.pro, a full-service media company. Whether it is audio, video, shorts, or longer pieces, we're able to take each project from beginning to final product within your time frame and on budget. Visit kmmedia.pro for more details about us and to get started on your project. We also would like to thank the Brushwood Media Network for all their support. Go to brushwoodmedianetwork.com to find out more about them and the quality shows featured on the network. Until then, we'll see you next time. My name again is Kevin McDonald, and please remember, be kind to one another, because each other's all we've got.